key features of functions. And the key features of functions are basically just any part of the function that we can use to describe what's going on. Remember that a function is something that when you put something in, you're going to be getting something out. You put in an input and you get out an output. What we're going to be doing is looking at graphs of functions and looking for things that are in common, things that like explain what's going on and then talk about them. So our goals for today are to be able to identify features of graphs, and we're going to be able to understand a lot of things. Some of these things include domain and range, concavity, increasing, decreasing, positive and negative, x and y intercepts, axis of symmetry, and behavior, and anything else that you can think of. It's a really long list. It's going to take some time to get through it. So just get ready to take some notes, basically. We're going to have some key features, and you'll notice that some of these are starred. These are the ones. I'm going to star another one on here just because. So some of these are starred. These ones are starred because they're things that aren't really self-explanatory. Like increasing and decreasing should be like easy enough to understand. Domain and range are really weird ones. So we have domain and range, increasing, decreasing, positive and negative, x and y intercepts, concavity and behavior, and axis of symmetry. We're going to go over all of these things today. And we're going to start with our domain and range. Now our domain is going to be our input. It's going to be our x values. So whatever we get out of, whatever we put into a function or what we can put into a function is going to be our domain. Sometimes you are going to have something that breaks. Like some equations, like some functions, you can't put in 0 because suddenly you're dividing by 0 and that makes everything explode. So our domain is just any x value that you can put in and it will actually work. Our range is the y values that you can get out. Whatever you're getting spitting out of the function or our output, that's going to be our range. Our notation is going to be interesting, and it's going to go back to our open and closed circles, but we're going to add something else. So brackets are used to include a number. So if you're writing it out, you'd write it out as almost like you're writing it as an ordered pair, but it's going to be called a set, or it's going to be, a set is probably the best way to like a set or an interval. So brackets are going to be used to include the number. It's the same thing as if you had a closed circle. Parentheses are used to exclude the number, so we're not going to include it. Including means that we can get to the number, we can plug it in, it is perfectly fine, and we can get all the way up to that number. Parentheses excluding means that we can almost get there. We can get really, 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 really close, but we can't quite get there. Take infinity, for example. Infinity is a really good example of this because you think, oh, that's a number, I can plug it in. But in reality, we can never get to infinity. We can go to infinity plus 1, and now we're at a new infinity. And so we're always going to have that option to go infinity plus 1, and we're always going to have an option to never get to infinity. So let's go over some examples of this. We have examples of domain and range, and these examples are going to be here throughout the entire thing. Every single one that we're going to talk about is going to use these same examples just so that you can have an idea of what's going on. Remember, domain is our x's, our input, and range is our output, which is our y. And we're going to write things as an interval, and so we're going to do an interval notation. Now, our question for our domain is, what numbers can we plug in? Well, these arrows down here tell us that we're going to keep going on forever. So we can go to -4, we can go to -5, we can go to -6, we can go all the way down to negative infinity. So our domain here starts at negative infinity, and we're going to go from smallest to biggest. So we're going to go from negative infinity, and this other arrow is going all the way down to positive infinity, because you notice that we're going to keep going this way. So our domain for this one is from negative to positive infinity. And our range, that's going to be our output of our y. We're going to go look at our y value here, our y-axis. We're going to keep going, and we're going to get smaller and smaller and smaller all the way down to negative infinity. So the smallest number that we can get down to is negative infinity. What's the biggest number we can get to? Well, we're going to keep going, and we're going to go, well, let's go this way. We'll keep going up, 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 until we reach a peak at 1, and then we're going to keep going down. So the highest number that we're ever going to get to, because you notice it doesn't do like some like wonky thing, is going to be 1. And we're going to include that number because we can get to 1. That's a number on our graph. Let's do this one. This one's really weird. So we're doing this one. This one is really weird. And what's going to happen? Well, we're going to go our domain and our range. Well, our domain is our inputs. So we can go from where? Well, that's about a -11. And you notice down here it's a closed circle. That means that we're going to include it. So that's about a -11. We're going to include that number. That means that we can plug in -11. We can't go past it, but we can get really close. Like we can get up to -11, but we can't go farther. And here, it looks like we're at +11. But you notice that it's an open circle. So that means that we can get really close to +11, but we can't quite get there. Now, what about our range? Well, our range kind of goes from is how small we can get to how big we can get. Down here, it's a closed circle, meaning that we can get to that number. The smallest value on here, because if you notice, draw a straight line across, you're not going to get any other points. Our smallest value that we can get down here is -11, and we can get to it. It's a closed circle. Up here, that's our highest point that we can ever get to. That's at about a 5. But the question is, can we actually get there? No, we can't because we have an open circle, so we have to have it as a parentheses. This is how you're going to write it. And remember, the domain is our x, range is our y, and by the way, range is going to be the only thing that we're ever going to talk about in y. Everything else is going to be from biggest or smallest to biggest in x. Range is smallest to biggest in y. So here's a quick check. Go ahead and state the domain and range of each of these functions. I know they're a little bit hard to see at some point, but just do your best and we'll make it work.